A wooden staff shatters beneath the fury of twin blades, and in that moment, the galaxy holds its breath. A master falls, struck down not by an enemy, but by the very student he trusted above all others. The Senate chamber of Coruscant bears witness as ancient wisdom bleeds onto cold marble, and a dark lord is born from the ashes of a broken bond. But this is not where our story begins. 4,000 years before the rise of the Empire, before Darth Vader's shadow stretched across star systems, another fall echoed through the Force, a fall so catastrophic that its reverberations would shape Jedi philosophy for millennia. His name was Exar Kun, and he was the most gifted student the Order had ever seen, brilliant, ambitious, unstoppable. His master's name was Vodo-Siosk Baas, a legendary Krivaiki Jedi who believed that trust, not control, was the path to guiding greatness. He believed that knowledge, not ignorance, would armor his students against the seductions of darkness. He was wrong. Or was he? This is the story of a master who dared to teach differently, who watched his greatest achievement become his deepest failure, who faced his own student in combat, knowing only one would leave alive. This is the chronicle of the Great Sith War, of choices made in the shadows of ancient tombs, of trust shattered and wisdom forged in the crucible of loss. Tonight we journey back to an age when the Force hung in balance, when the line between Jedi and Sith was crossed by those who believed they could walk both paths. We will witness the price of ambition, the weight of teaching, and the question that haunts every master across the ages. Could you save a student determined to fall? So before you settle in, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these deep dives into Star Wars lore. Here's something interesting. About 64% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet. If you're finding value in these stories, hitting that subscribe button truly helps this channel grow and allows me to bring you more ancient Star Wars tales. Drop a comment telling me where in the galaxy you're listening from and what time it is there. I'm genuinely curious to know if you're starting your day or winding down your night with this journey into Jedi history. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Get comfortable under your blanket, and let's step back 4 millennia together to walk alongside a master whose wisdom still echoes through the Force. Close your eyes and let the Force carry you backward through time. The Clone Wars fade. The old Republic dissolves. Darth Revan's crusade becomes a distant future. Travel back nearly 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, to an era when the Jedi Order stood at its height, guardians of a republic that stretched across countless star systems. Our story unfolds primarily on Dantooine, a world of endless grasslands and ancient ruins, where the wind whispers through stone corridors that have sheltered Jedi for generations. Here stands the Enclave, a sanctuary of learning far from the grand temples of Coruscant, where exceptional students come to train under exceptional masters. The sun bleaches the stones to pale gold, and at night, twin moons paint silver paths across training courtyards where legends once practiced their forms. But our journey also takes us to Ossus, the great library world, repository of millennia of Jedi knowledge. Imagine towers filled with holocrons glowing like captured stars, ancient texts preserved in climate-controlled chambers, and meditation halls where the Force itself seems to hum with accumulated wisdom. This is the heart of the Jedi Order, where the Assembly of Masters convenes to guide the galaxy's protectors. You are a Jedi historian living in the modern era, standing in what remains of Dantooine's enclave. Before you hovers a holocron, its surfaces etched with geometric patterns that seem to shift in the low light. You've activated it after years of research, seeking to understand the origins of the Great Sith War, that cataclysmic conflict that nearly destroyed the Republic 4 millennia ago. The holocron flickers, and a figure materializes before you. Not human, but Kriva-Haki, a being whose form seems alien, yet somehow noble. 4 tentacles where legs should be, more tentacles serving as arms, and a face composed of shifting chitinous plates that make expressions difficult to read. Yet the presence radiating from this projection carries undeniable warmth, wisdom earned through decades of teaching, and one terrible, defining tragedy. This is Vodo-Siosk Baas, speaking to you across an impossible gulf of time. Beside you stands Master Tien Solasa, historian of Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order, who has spent years studying this very figure. She composed a ballad about Vodo, teaching his story to younglings so they might learn from both his wisdom and his pain. Your own master observes quietly, for every teacher who has ever guided a student seeks answers to the same haunting question. How do you save those determined to fall? How do you teach power without breeding arrogance? How do you trust without enabling destruction? Vodo's gatekeeper regards you with ancient eyes, and in a voice that carries the weight of 4,000 years, he begins. Vodo-Siosk Baas did not begin as a legend. Like all Jedi, he walked a long path from student to master, forging his philosophy through experience, failure, and the kind of hard-won understanding that comes only from facing darkness and choosing light. The Krevaki species hailed from a world few in the Republic ever visited, and Vodo kept the details of his homeworld guarded, even from fellow masters. Perhaps this instinct for privacy shaped his teaching style, for he understood that every being carries secrets, shadows they must confront alone before they can stand fully in the light. What distinguished Vodo from other masters of his era was not raw force power, though he possessed that in abundance. It was specialization. While other Jedi studied broadly, Vodo became the Order's foremost expert in lightsaber construction. He could forge a weapon in mere days, understanding the resonance between crystal and wielder in ways that bordered on the mystical. Students traveled from across the galaxy to learn this craft from him, knowing that a lightsaber built under Vodo's guidance would serve them for life. But there was another reason students sought him out. Vodo was unconventional. Where most masters wielded elegant lightsabers, Vodo carried a simple wooden walking stick, approximately 1.5 meters of plain wood with fabric wrapped around one end. To the uninitiated, it looked like the support cane of an aging being. To those who faced it in combat, it became something else entirely. Through the Force, Vodo imbued that humble staff with such power that it could withstand lightsaber strikes, shatter stone, and disarm opponents with transfers of kinetic energy that sent weapons flying from hands. He proved again and again that mastery trumped tools. A stick in the hands of a master defeated 2 lightsabers in the hands of the talented but unrefined. This became his central teaching. Strength comes not from the weapon, but from the one who wields it. Power means nothing without control, and control means nothing without wisdom. By the time Vodo established his academy on Dantooine, he had already trained several students who achieved legendary status. Dace the and Kuel II became Jedi Shadows, hunters of dark side artifacts who operated in the murky spaces between light and dark, using knowledge of the enemy to protect the innocent. They learned from Vodo that understanding evil did not mean embracing it. Shunlub presented Vodo with a different challenge altogether. Her raw force power was limited compared to other students, yet under Vodo's instruction, she achieved what he considered his greatest success. Kulu developed a matchless understanding of the Force's fundamental nature, becoming more learned in ancient Jedi lore than students with twice her natural ability. Vodo proved that wisdom could surpass power, that deep understanding mattered more than flashy displays. Then there was Nomi Sunrider. She came to Vodo not as a primary student, but through an arrangement with his contemporary and fellow master Then of Ambria. Then was a Tuktai, a being even more alien in appearance than Vodo, who had transformed the dark side poisoned world of Ambria into a place of healing through sheer patient application of the light. Then specialized in what some called beast mastery, forming bonds with creatures others feared, demonstrating that the Force flowed through all living things equally. Nomi had lost her husband to violence and reluctantly taken up his path as a Jedi. Thun trained her in meditation, in battle coordination, in the subtle art of influencing events through the Force. But when the time came to construct her lightsaber, Thun brought her to Ossus, specifically to work with Vodo. The two masters respected each other's expertise, referring students back and forth, recognizing that no single teacher possessed all wisdom. Vodo guided Nomi through the meditative process of choosing crystals, attuning to their resonance, assembling the components in the proper order, while maintaining Force connection throughout. The lightsaber she built under his instruction served her through the trials ahead, a weapon that saved her life and the lives of countless others during the conflicts to come. These successes built Vodo's reputation. Masters across the Order spoke his name with respect. The assembly, that gathering of the most powerful and wise Jedi, welcomed him as an equal alongside legends like Thorn, Arca-Jeth the Arcanian Master, Ud Bana, the ancient Neti, who had lived for centuries, and Odan Uda, the keeper of forbidden knowledge. Vodo's time divided between Ossus and Dantooine. On Ossus he participated in assembly discussions, debated philosophy with other masters, and contributed to the great project of preserving Jedi knowledge for future generations. But Dantooine called to him. There, away from the sometimes rigid traditionalism of the grand temples, he could experiment with teaching methods, challenge students in unconventional ways, and prepare them for the reality that darkness would always seek to corrupt the galaxy's guardians. His philosophy crystallized through years of experience. The dark side had risen before, and would rise again. History proved this beyond doubt. Therefore, the Jedi's purpose was not to hide from darkness, but to strengthen light-bearers who could face it without flinching, without falling, without forgetting who they were in the process. This meant teaching students about the Sith, not in clinical distant terms, but as real threats with real appeal. Vodo believed that Jedi who understood why beings fell to darkness could better resist those same temptations in themselves. Knowledge, he argued, was armor. Ignorance left vulnerabilities. Not all masters agreed with this approach. Some felt that any exposure to dark side philosophy planted seeds of corruption. Better to shield students completely, they said, teaching only light side techniques until maturity and wisdom made them immune to seduction. Vodo disagreed. In his view, that approach created curiosity without context, questions without answers, rebellion against restrictions that seemed arbitrary rather than protective. He had seen it before. Jedi who broke rules simply because they existed, who sought forbidden knowledge precisely because it was forbidden. Better, Vodo thought, to teach in the light what darkness would eventually whisper in shadow. Better to arm students with understanding, so that when the inevitable temptation came, they recognized it for what it was. This philosophy defined his academy on Dantooine. Students came to him not just to learn technique, but to be challenged, questioned, pushed beyond comfortable boundaries in controlled ways. He sparred with them relentlessly, teaching through experience rather than lecture. He meditated with them in the grasslands, demonstrating how the Force flowed through simple growing things, how patience and connection mattered more than aggressive action. At night, in those same grasslands under Dantooine's twin moons, Vodo would practice his staff forms alone. The rhythmic striking of wood against stone created a meditation in motion, a reminder that even the simplest tool became extraordinary in dedicated hands. He devoted his life to teaching Jedi Knights, to strengthening the light side against the tide of darkness that was sure to come. Every student he trained was a candle lit against future shadow. Every lesson passed on was a bulwark against the Sith's patient, inevitable return. His success bred confidence. After training so many who resisted darkness, who became protectors and teachers themselves, Vodo came to believe he understood the formula. He thought he had cracked the code of how to guide even the most ambitious student safely through the dangerous years of development. This confidence, this certainty born of success, would become the foundation of his greatest tragedy. Because in the year 3998, before the Battle of Yavin, 3 new students arrived at his academy on Dantooine. 2 Cathar, bonded as mates, seeking to honor their species through Jedi service, and 1 human, burning with a hunger that would consume worlds. Their arrival changed everything. Exar Kun arrived first. The young human male walked into Vodo's training courtyard with the kind of confidence that could either forge a hero or birth a monster. Talent radiated from him, like heat from a sun. Even standing still, he commanded attention, drew the eye, made everything around him seem lesser by comparison. Vodo recognized the signs immediately. He had seen gifted students before, those touched by the Force in ways that set them apart from birth. But Kumba's connection went deeper than mere aptitude. The Force sang through him with a clarity and strength that appeared perhaps once in a generation. During their first sparring session, Kun demonstrated lightsaber technique far beyond his years. His blade work flowed like water, adapting instantly to Vodo's attacks, finding openings that should not have existed, pressing advantages with tactical brilliance that suggested either extensive prior training or pure instinct elevated to art form. Vodo tested him with increasingly difficult challenges. Kurin met each one. When Vodo used the Force to hurl training stones, Kurin deflected them while maintaining his offensive rhythm. When Vodo altered the tempo of combat from fast to slow to chaotic, Kurin adapted within heartbeats. When Vodo switched from his walking stick to a borrowed lightsaber to see how Kurin handled different weapon types, the young human adjusted his form seamlessly. After one particularly intense session, Vodo leaned on his staff, studying his new student with those unreadable Krivaki features. "You are the most formidable student I have ever had," he said quietly. Kun's eyes lit with pride at the praise. "But I sense something is missing in you," Vodo continued. "An empty place hidden even from yourself. A region of your heart where no light escapes." The brightness faded from Kun's expression, replaced by something harder to read. Defensiveness perhaps, or curiosity about this perceived flaw, or simply the determination to prove his master wrong. Weeks later, 2 more students joined the academy. Credo and Silvar, both Cathar from their species' homeworld, where humans walked on 2 legs. Cathar combined feline grace with warrior culture, their bodies built for speed and their society structured around honor and loyalty to family units. Cradar possessed ambition that rivaled Kun's, though his skill did not match it. He wanted greatness, craved recognition, sought to become renowned among his people for bringing Jedi wisdom back to Cathar. When he watched Kun spar, something like worship entered his eyes. Here was everything Cradar wanted to be, a living example of what mastery looked like. Silvar saw things differently. Where her mate admired Kun's brilliance, she distrusted his arrogance. Cathar society valued the pack, the collective, the understanding that individual strength served the group rather than personal glory. Kun's self-focused intensity violated everything her culture taught about balance and belonging. The dynamic between the 3 students established itself quickly. Kun regularly defeated both Cathar in combat, sometimes simultaneously. His superiority in technique was undeniable, but Crado interpreted these defeats as lessons from a superior being, opportunities to learn from someone destined for greatness. He began assisting Kun, supporting him, treating the human less like a fellow student and more like a mentor worth serving. Silvar found this dynamic disturbing. She said as much to Vodo during private sessions, expressing concern that Krydo's hero worship was unhealthy, that Kun encouraged rather than discouraged this imbalance, that something felt fundamentally wrong in how the human carried himself. Vodo listened to her concerns. He shared them, to a degree, but he also believed that time and proper guidance would shape Khon's raw edges into something magnificent. Arrogance could be tempered. Ambition could be channeled. The empty place Vodo sensed in Khon's heart could be filled with wisdom if only the master proved patient and skilled enough. He taught them together and separately, varying his approach based on individual needs. With Khon, he emphasized humility through repeated demonstrations that skill mattered more than power. He would face Khon's two lightsabers with his simple walking stick, and through superior technique and force augmentation, disarm or defeat the talented human again and again. These lessons seemed to land. Khon would bow respectfully after each defeat, acknowledging his master's superiority, asking questions about technique that suggested genuine desire to learn rather than ego-driven resistance. But between formal training sessions, Khon spent hours in the archives. Vodo noticed but did not immediately intervene. Students naturally gravitated toward research, seeking to supplement practical training with historical knowledge. Nothing wrong with intellectual curiosity. What Vodo did not know was which texts Khon sought in those long night sessions. The young human had discovered references to the golden age of the Sith, that ancient era when dark side practitioners ruled vast empires and wielded powers the modern Jedi had forgotten or suppressed. He read about Freeden Nad, a fallen Jedi who became a Sith Lord. He studied accounts of Naga Sadow, whose ambitions nearly destroyed the Republic a millennium earlier. The more Khon read, the more convinced he became that the modern Jedi Order had lost its way. These ancient Sith possessed knowledge that could reshape reality, extend life, command the Force with authority that made current Jedi techniques look like children's games. If such power existed, why did the Jedi hide it? If understanding both light and dark led to true balance, why did the Order forbid even studying Sith philosophy? Questions bred resentment. Resentment bred determination to find answers the Order would not provide. The breaking point came during a routine sparring session that turned catastrophic. Khon faced Silvar, who fought with Katha ferocity tempered by Jedi control. They matched each other for several exchanges, neither gaining advantage. Then Khon made a comment, something dismissive about Katha being good fighters, but lacking the intelligence for true Force mastery. Silvar's control shattered. Katha pride and personal offense combined explosively. She dropped her lightsaber and attacked with claws extended, raking across Khon's face hard enough to draw blood. Khon fell into vicious rage. The change was instant and terrifying. All pretense of Jedi calm vanished, replaced by fury that transformed his entire presence. He attacked Silvar with killing intent, his technique no longer beautiful but brutal, efficient, designed to harm rather than merely defeat. Vodo intervened immediately, stepping between them with his walking stick. Khon, lost in rage, grabbed a second training lightsaber that Crado, in a moment of catastrophically poor judgment, tossed to him. Two lightsabers against a wooden stick, youth and rage and raw power against age and wisdom and perfect technique. The courtyard erupted with the sounds of combat as Vodo defended Silvar, held Khon at bay, demonstrated that even overwhelmed and facing dual blades, mastery prevailed. Until it didn't. Khon's assault finally connected. The walking stick cracked, then shattered under the combined fury of twin strikes. Silence fell over the courtyard. Khon stood panting, holding broken weapon fragments. Vodo remained upright, tentacles steady, expression unreadable behind those chitinous facial plates. "The lesson is taught," Vodo said quietly. "Skill transcends power, but power without control destroys even itself." 3 days later, Exar Kun left Dantooine. He declared himself ready to become a Jedi Knight, announced his intention to discover knowledge the Order had forgotten, and departed before Vodo could forbid the journey. Crado and Silvar watched him go. one with admiration, one with dread. The walking stick could be repaired. The damage to the master-student bond would prove more difficult to mend. Vodo spent the evening, after that disastrous sparring session alone in his chambers, carefully binding the fractured wood with wrappings and force-enhanced adhesives. The physical repair took hours. The metaphorical repair might take years if it could be accomplished at all. He replayed the incident repeatedly in his mind, analyzing what he had witnessed, the rage that transformed Kuhn's face, the killing intent that replaced controlled technique, the absolute loss of Jedi discipline in favor of something darker, more primal, more dangerous. Most troubling was what Vodo had felt through the Force during those moments. Not just anger, which even Jedi struggled to master, but hunger, a void opening inside Kuhn, reaching out for something to fill itself, caring nothing for consequences or costs. That empty place Vodo had sensed before, the darkness where no light escaped, had opened wider during combat, and for just an instant, Vodo glimpsed what lived inside that void. Not merely ambition or pride, but a fundamental belief that Kuhn deserved more than the universe was giving him. That power existed somewhere, forbidden and hidden, and that those who kept it from him were obstacles to be overcome rather than teachers to be trusted. The night after the incident, Vodo found Korn in the archives again. The young human sat surrounded by datacrons and ancient texts, his face illuminated by the blue glow of a holo projector displaying some historical record or another. Vodo approached quietly, observing what his student studied before making his presence known. The projection showed Onderon, an inner rim world with a troubled history. Specifically, it detailed the reign of Frieden Nad, a fallen Jedi who had conquered that world 400 years earlier through Sith sorcery and ruled as a Dark Lord until his death. "May I join you?" Vodo asked. Not a command, but a request. Kuhn minimized the projection quickly, too quickly, like someone caught accessing materials they knew were questionable. "Of course, Master. I was just researching historical conflicts between Jedi and Sith." Vodo settled his alien form onto a meditation cushion across from Kuhn, a worthy subject.
Tell me what you are learning.
For the next hour, they discussed Frieden Nad's fall from grace. Kuhn asked probing questions about why Nad had turned to the dark side, what powers he gained through that transition, whether the knowledge he acquired died with him or survived in some form. Vodo answered honestly. He believed in facing darkness through understanding rather than ignorance. Yes, Nandad's spirit likely persisted in some fashion. Yes, Sith techniques granted powers the Jedi did not teach. Yes, forbidden knowledge existed on various worlds, locked away but not destroyed. "Why?" Kuhn asked, leaning forward with intensity that felt almost predatory. "Why do we not study these techniques? If knowledge is power, and if we claim to serve the light, should we not understand the dark to better combat it?" Vodo had heard this argument before. He had made versions of it himself in assembly debates. "Some knowledge corrupts through exposure," he said carefully, "like a poison that seeps through skin, regardless of intention. The Sith techniques require drawing on emotions that contradict Jedi principles: fear, anger, hatred, suffering. You cannot study them without invoking them, and invoking them creates pathways in your mind that deepen with each use." "But you teach us about the Sith," Korn countered. "You explain their history, their methods, their weaknesses. Is that not studying them?" "There is a difference between understanding an enemy's tactics and practicing those tactics yourself. I can teach you how the Sith use fear to dominate minds without having you actually dominate minds through fear. The knowledge protects you. The practice corrupts you." Kuhn absorbed this, seeming to accept the distinction. Then he asked another question that revealed how deeply he had researched. "What about the Tedran holocron? I have heard you possess it. Does it not contain Sith knowledge? Vodo's tentacles stilled. The Tedran holocron was indeed in his possession, a teaching tool he used carefully with advanced students to demonstrate certain historical realities about the dark side. It contained interviews with fallen Jedi, explanations of how corruption occurred, warnings from those who had walked the dark path and returned. It does, Vodo admitted, under controlled circumstances, with mature students prepared to encounter such material. It serves as a vaccination of sorts, exposure in small, controlled doses with proper guidance. May I study it? The question hung between them, weighted with implications both recognized. This was a test. Kun asking permission revealed some remaining trust in his master's judgment, but the hunger behind the question suggested motives beyond simple academic interest. Not yet, Vodo said gently. You have years of training ahead before such materials become appropriate. Kun's expression flickered with something close to anger before smoothing back to neutral acceptance. As you say, Master. But Vodo caught that flicker, filed it away with other concerning signs accumulating like storm clouds on a distant horizon. The following weeks brought a shift in Kun's demeanor. He remained outwardly respectful, attended training sessions, completed assigned meditations, yet a distance opened between him and Vodo, a subtle withdrawal that the master felt but could not quite define. Silvar noticed it too. She approached Vodo one morning before dawn, finding him practicing staff forms in the courtyard. Master, she said, without preamble, Kun is planning something. What makes you think so? Krydo talks in his sleep. He mumbles about tombs and power and journeys. When I asked him about it, he became defensive, said it was nothing, told me I worried too much. Vodo ceased his forms, considering, have you spoken with Kun directly about your concerns? He would not listen to me. He barely acknowledges my existence, except to demonstrate his superiority. Silvar's tail lashed with frustration, but Krysi listens to him, worships him. If Kun told Krysi to walk into a star, I think he might actually do it. The Katha's words struck deeper than she knew. Vodo himself had noticed the unhealthy dynamic developing between his students. Kun's charisma, his undeniable talent, created a gravitational pull that bent weaker personalities toward him. I will speak with him again, Vodo promised. That conversation happened 3 days later. Vodo called Kun to a private meditation chamber and asked directly about his intentions. The young human met his master's gaze steadily, showing no signs of deception or guilt. I am planning to leave Dantooine, Kun said simply. Not permanently, just to conduct research on several worlds connected to Jedi history. Which worlds? Onderon, to start. The archives there contain records from Frieden Nad's reign that are not available here. Primary sources that might illuminate how corruption happens, what warning signs the Jedi of that era missed. The answer was reasonable, academically sound, completely logical, yet Vodo's instincts screamed warnings. Something beneath the surface, some deeper current, pulled his student toward Onderon for reasons beyond scholarly interest. I would prefer you remain here for another year, Vodo said. Your training is not complete. With respect, Master, is any Jedi's training ever truly complete? You yourself study constantly, seeking deeper understanding. How can I become a master if I do not eventually pursue knowledge independently? The argument held merit. Vodo had encouraged independent thinking, questioned rigid traditionalism, taught his students to trust their own judgment. Now that teaching turned back on him, he faced a choice: forbid the journey, which would confirm Kun's growing belief that the Jedi Order suppressed truth and constrained those who sought genuine understanding, or trust his student, trust his own teaching, trust that the foundation laid over these years would hold against whatever temptations Onderon presented. Trust is the foundation of the master-student bond. Vodo said slowly, making his decision even as he spoke. But blind faith is its corruption. Go, if you must, but take Crado and Silva with you. Let your fellow students provide perspective and support. Kun bowed respectfully. Thank you, Master. Your trust honors me. 2 weeks later, all 3 students departed Dantooine aboard a transport bound for the Inner Rim. Vodo stood on the landing platform, watching their ship climb into the atmosphere until it vanished among the stars. He returned to his chambers and sat in meditation for 12 hours straight, seeking guidance from the Force about whether he had made the right choice. The Force gave no clear answer, only a growing sense of unease that settled into his bones and refused to leave. The first transmissions from Onderon arrived within days, and they seemed to confirm Vodo's hope that trust had been the correct path. Tsung's messages carried intellectual excitement rather than darkness. He described the royal archives in Isis, the capital city, where centuries of records documented Freedom Nad's reign with surprising detail. The fallen Jedi's transformation was gradual, Kun reported, not the sudden corruption that Jedi teachings often suggested. Nad spent years studying Sith philosophy before fully embracing it, and during that transition period, he genuinely believed he was pursuing balance rather than falling to darkness. This fascinated Kryce. The gradual nature of corruption meant warning signs existed, markers that could be identified and addressed before the point of no return. If the Order understood these markers better, perhaps future falls could be prevented entirely. Vodo found himself agreeing with this analysis. Kun's research served the light by examining how darkness operated, knowledge as armor, exactly as Vodo had always taught. Krado's messages were shorter, less analytical, mainly confirming that all 3 students remained safe and that their research proceeded without incident. Nothing in his words suggested problems. Silva's communications told a different story. Master, she wrote in one encrypted transmission meant for Vodo's eyes alone. Kun is changing, subtly, but I feel it. He spends hours in the royal crypts beneath Isis, studying Nad's personal effects. When he emerges, his eyes have this quality I cannot describe, like he is looking through our reality towards something beyond it. Vodo meditated on this warning, weighing Silva's instincts against Kun's seemingly sound research. The Cathar was perceptive, but she had distrusted Kun from the beginning. Perhaps her concerns reflected existing bias rather than genuine danger. He sent a carefully worded response advising caution, but not demanding immediate return. Trust, he reminded himself. The foundation must hold. 2 weeks after their arrival on Onderon, the nature of Kun's transmissions shifted. He mentioned discovering references to Freedom Nad's tomb, located not on Onderon itself but on Dexon, one of the planet's moons. The tomb supposedly contained Nad's most guarded secrets, techniques preserved beyond death for those worthy to claim them. Kun requested permission to investigate this tomb. Vodo's immediate instinct was refusal. Tombs of Sith Lords were not academic curiosities. They were traps, deliberately designed to corrupt those who entered seeking knowledge. The dark side concentrated in such places, soaking into stone and air, waiting patiently for minds to poison. But refusing would validate every criticism Kun had leveled against Jedi restrictiveness. It would prove that the Order feared knowledge, that Masters controlled students through denial rather than guidance, and Kun was not alone. Crado and Silva would accompany him, providing balance and perspective. Vodo granted permission, with explicit conditions. Enter as observers only, touch nothing. Activate no mechanisms. Document what you find, then leave immediately. Kun acknowledged these instructions, said he understood completely, promised to exercise appropriate caution. That was the last normal transmission Vodo received. On Ossus, far from Dantooine, the assembly of Masters had gathered for reasons unrelated to Vodo's students. Word had reached the Jedi. that Onderon was again experiencing dark side resurgence. Nadist cultists, worshippers of the long-dead Sith Lord, had risen against the legitimate government. The situation had deteriorated to the point that Master Arca-Jeth, the legendary Arcanian Jedi, had personally traveled to Onderon with a team of knights to restore order. Vodo attended this emergency session, learning with growing dread that his students had arrived on Onderon precisely as it descended into chaos. Worse, intelligence suggested the Nadist cultists were actively searching for Freeden Nad's tomb on Daxin, hoping to channel the dead Sith Lord's power. The same tomb Kuhn had requested permission to explore. Vodo immediately attempted to contact his students. The communication channels remained silent. Whether due to technical malfunction or deliberate choice, he could not determine. During meditation that night, Vodo reached out through the Force, seeking the familiar presence of his most gifted student. What he touched made his blood freeze. Kuhn's Force signature had altered. The brightness that once defined him remained, but something dark threaded through it now, winding like smoke through clear air. Not yet consumed, but touched, changed, tainted in ways that might or might not be reversible. Vodo shared his concerns with the assembly. Master Arca-Jeth, recently returned from Onderon's surface, confirmed that the Nadist situation had been resolved, but mentioned encountering two young Jedi, a male and female Katha, in Iziz. They claimed to be researching with a human companion who had gone ahead to Dexon. The pieces assembled themselves into a picture Vodo desperately wanted to deny, but could not ignore. Kuhn had entered Nad's tomb. Something had happened there. The student who left that tomb would not be the same one who entered. 3 days later, a transmission finally arrived, but not from Kuhn. Silvar's face appeared on the holoprojector, and even through the flickering blue light, Vodo could see terror in her features. "Master, you must come." Kuhn went into the tomb. He was inside for hours. When he emerged, I barely recognized him. His skin bears marks, tattoos that were not there before. His voice carries this undertone, like multiple people speaking simultaneously. Krydo says everything is fine, that Kuhn simply experienced a powerful Force vision. But Master, something is wrong. Deeply, terribly wrong. Before Vodo could respond, the transmission cut off. He did not hesitate. Within hours he had boarded a transport bound for Onderon, bringing with him every Jedi he could quickly assemble. If Kuhn could be saved, it would require intervention now, before whatever darkness touched him took complete hold. But even as he traveled, Vodo felt through the Force that he was already too late. The connection between master and student, that bond forged through years of teaching, had transformed into something jagged and painful. Like touching broken glass, every attempt to reach Kuhn through the Force resulted in sharp rejection. The transport emerged from hyperspace near Onderon, and Vodo stared at the green and brown world turning below. Somewhere on that planet, or its moon, his student was making choices that would define both their futures. Had trust been wisdom or denial? Had granting freedom enabled growth or corruption? The questions tormented Vodo as he descended toward Iziz. He found Silvar first, waiting at the spaceport with clear relief at seeing her master again. Krydo stood behind her, but his enthusiasm at Vodo's arrival seemed forced, performative, as if he played a role rather than expressed genuine emotion. "Where is Kuhn?" Vodo asked. Silvar's ears flattened against her skull. "He left, said he had other tombs to explore, other knowledge to claim. He went to Korriban." The name struck Vodo like a physical blow. Korriban, the Sith homeworld, graveyard of Dark Lords stretching back millennia. If Onderon had changed Kuhn, Korriban would complete his transformation. "We must follow him," Vodo said. But Krydo stepped forward, and for the first time, Vodo saw complete certainty in the young Cathar's eyes. "No, Master." Khan knows what he is doing. He is discovering truths the Jedi have suppressed for centuries. When he returns, he will teach us all a better way. Silva turned to her mate, shock and betrayal warring across her feline features. You cannot believe that. You saw what happened to him. I saw him transcend limitation, Kryto replied calmly. Something you are too afraid to understand. The student Vodo had trusted, the one he believed would provide balance, had already been lost. The question now was whether Kun himself could still be reached, or whether the master would face his greatest student as an enemy rather than a pupil in need of guidance. Korriban rose from hyperspace, like a wound in reality itself. The planet's surface stretched below in shades of rust and dried blood, broken by valleys that scarred the landscape like claw marks. Even from orbit, the dark side's presence pressed against consciousness, a weight that made breathing difficult and thinking clearly nearly impossible. This was the birthplace of the Sith Empire, the tomb world where Dark Lords had been buried for thousands of years. Their concentrated malevolence had soaked into the very stone, transforming Korriban into a place where the Force itself felt diseased, corrupted, wrong in ways that made even approaching the planet an act of spiritual danger. Exar Kun descended toward this nightmare with something close to joy. The journey from Onderon to Korriban had taken weeks, but those weeks had transformed him more than the previous years of Jedi training. In Freeden Nad's tomb on Dexon, he had not simply found knowledge, he had been found by something far older and more patient. Nad's spirit, preserved through Sith sorcery for 4 centuries, had waited for someone like Kun, talented enough to matter, ambitious enough to tempt, proud enough to believe himself immune to corruption while actively embracing it. The dead Sith Lord had not forced Kun toward darkness. He had simply shown him what power looked like when freed from Jedi restrictions, and Kun, believing himself strong enough to study evil without becoming it, had accepted those lessons eagerly. Now Nad's voice whispered in his mind constantly, guiding him toward Korriban's Valley of the Dark Lords, where the greatest Sith Masters lay entombed. There, Nad promised, Korn would find techniques that would elevate him beyond any Jedi who had ever lived. The ship touched down on ancient landing platforms outside the valley. Kurin emerged alone. He had left Kryto and Silvar on Onderon, unwilling to share what he was about to claim. Some knowledge was too powerful to distribute freely. Some transformations required solitude. The Valley of the Dark Lords opened before him like a throat waiting to swallow. Massive statues lined the approach, depicting Sith of various species in postures of dominance and cruelty. Their stone eyes seemed to track his movement, and perhaps they did. The dark side concentrated here so intensely that stone itself might possess a form of awareness. Kunti walked forward without hesitation. Fear had no place in his emotional landscape anymore. He had transcended such weakness in Nad's tomb, where the choice between death and power had revealed what truly mattered. The tombs themselves were architectural impossibilities, structures that defied physics through Sith sorcery applied during their construction. Doorways stood at angles that hurt to perceive directly. Shadows fell in directions that contradicted any visible light source. The air tasted of copper and ash, as if breathing in the residue of ancient violence. Thun entered the tomb of Marka Ragnos first. The ancient Sith Lord had ruled the Sith Empire during its golden age, centuries before the Republic even knew the Sith existed. His tomb supposedly contained holocrons and texts detailing techniques lost when the Sith Empire eventually fell. Inside, darkness became absolute. Not merely the absence of light, but the presence of something that consumed light, prevented it, rejected it at a fundamental level. Kun ignited his lightsaber, and the blade's glow seemed to shrink, dimming as if the darkness had mass and pressure. Freeden Nad's spirit materialized beside him, glowing with sickly phosphorescence. Deeper, the dead Sith urged. The knowledge you seek lies in the innermost chamber. Kun pressed forward through corridors lined with ancient warnings in dead languages. His Jedi training allowed him to decipher some of them. Turn back. The price exceeds the prize. Knowledge here consumes the seeker. He ignored every warning. Warnings were for the weak, those who lacked the strength to claim power and wield it responsibly. He was different, special, chosen by the Force itself for greatness. The innermost chamber contained a raised platform surrounded by carved reliefs depicting Sith rituals. On the platform sat a holocron, its geometric surfaces pulsing with red light that had no business existing after so many centuries dormant. Kun reached for it. The tomb responded. Stone shifted with grinding sounds like bones breaking. The ceiling descended with inexorable weight. Walls contracted inward. The tomb was alive, or possessed sufficient dark side imbuement to simulate life, and it had been waiting for someone arrogant enough to steal from a Dark Lord's resting place. Condran. But the corridor that had led him inward now twisted back on itself, depositing him back in the central chamber no matter which direction he fled. The ceiling continued its descent. He tried using the Force to halt it, but the stone drank his power without slowing. Minutes remained before he would be crushed to paste between stone surfaces. Frida Nad's spirit hovered above the descending ceiling, untouched by physical matter. You must choose, boy. Die with your Jedi pride intact, or accept what the dark side offers. Serve me and I will teach you to survive this, and far more. Kunan's response was immediate and furious. I serve no one. But even as he said it, the reality of his situation clarified. Death approached with certainty. His Jedi training provided no solution. The Force techniques Vodo taught could not overcome this trap. Only darker methods, techniques Nad had shown him glimpses of, offered any chance of survival. The choice crystallized: die as a Jedi, or live as something else. Kun chose life, chose power, chose himself over principles that suddenly seemed abstract and pointless when weighed against extinction. He reached into the dark side without restraint, without the careful boundaries Jedi training had instilled. Power flooded through him, cold and vast, and utterly unconcerned with his survival or corruption. The dark side did not care about him. It simply was a tool waiting for anyone willing to grasp it regardless of cost. The descending stone halted, reversed direction, lifted away, as if weightless. But Kun's body had already been broken, ribs fractured, spine damaged, internal injuries that would kill him within hours. The dark side healed these wounds. It poured life back into dying tissue, knit bone back together, flooded his system with such overwhelming vitality that he felt more alive than ever before. The pain of healing surpassed the pain of injury, but Kun welcomed it. Pain meant sensation, and sensation meant existence, and existence meant power. He lay on Korriban's sun-baked surface outside the tomb, gasping. His body was whole, stronger than before, but fundamentally altered. Black markings had appeared on his skin, tattoos that emerged from within rather than applied from without. Sith alchemy rewriting his flesh to mark his transformation. And his mind. The empty place Vodo had sensed, that void where no light escaped, had been filled, but not with wisdom or compassion or any quality the Jedi would recognize as strength. It was filled with hunger, with absolute certainty that power justified itself, that might created right, that those strong enough to claim dominance deserved to rule. Kun's scream tore across Korriban's wasteland, a cry that resonated through the Force with such intensity that Jedi across the galaxy felt it as a disturbance. On Ossus, the assembly of masters gathered in emergency session, sensing that something catastrophic had occurred. On Dantooine, Vodo sat alone in his chambers, tears streaming down alien features as he felt his student fall beyond reach. But Khorne experienced no sadness. The scream was not anguish but triumph. He had passed through death and emerged reborn. The weak Jedi student who entered Nad's tomb no longer existed. In his place stood something unprecedented, a being who would combine Jedi training with Sith knowledge to achieve what neither tradition alone could accomplish. He returned to the tomb and claimed the holocron without resistance. The defenses recognized him now as Sith rather than intruder. Over the following weeks, he explored other tombs, gathering knowledge, growing in power, learning techniques that made Jedi abilities seem like children's tricks. Frieda Nad remained with him, guiding his education. The spirit explained that he had waited centuries for a student worthy of his knowledge, a Jedi powerful enough to overthrow Nad's own limitations and become what the dead Sith Lord could never quite achieve. Kund absorbed these teachings while planning Nad's destruction. He recognized manipulation when he experienced it, understood that the dead Sith Lord intended to possess his body, to use Kund as a vessel for resurrection. Nad thought himself the master of this relationship, but he underestimated his student's ambition. The final lesson Khun learned from Frieda Nad was how to destroy him. Using Sith sorcery gathered from multiple tombs, Khun shattered Nad's spirit utterly, dispersing it beyond any possibility of reconstitution. The dead Sith Lord's final scream echoed through the Force as he realized his centuries of planning had produced not a resurrection vessel, but his own executioner. Khun stood alone on Korriban, master of more dark side knowledge than any being had accumulated in generations. But knowledge alone was insufficient. He needed a power base, followers, resources to enact the grand vision crystallizing in his mind. The Force guided him to Yavin 4. The jungle moon orbited a gas giant in a system few remembered and fewer visited. But it had history. 1,000 years earlier, Sith Lord Naga Sado had fled here after the Great Hyperspace War, bringing with him the Masasi, a warrior race he had mutated through Sith alchemy into towering servants programmed for absolute obedience. Sado had built temples in the jungle, structures designed to channel dark side energy and amplify Force powers. Then he died or vanished, leaving his temples and his Masasi to slowly regress into primitive tribalism over the centuries. Khun arrived at Yavin 4 with purpose. The Masasi recognized power when they encountered it. Their genetic memory carried loyalty to Sith Lords encoded so deeply that Khun needed only demonstrate his abilities once before the entire civilization fell to worshipping him. He explored Sado's temples, finding them intact despite a millennium of abandonment. The architecture itself was a weapon, built to focus dark side energy in ways that made certain techniques possible. In these temples, Khun learned Sith alchemy, not from holocrons or texts, but from the structures themselves, which taught through direct Force immersion. He learned how to create monsters by altering living tissue at a fundamental level. He learned battle meditation that corrupted rather than coordinated, turning enemy forces against each other through induced madness. He learned techniques for draining life energy from multiple beings simultaneously to fuel his own power. And he learned to construct a new type of lightsaber. The ancient texts showed designs for double-bladed weapons, lightsabers with emitters at both ends of an extended hilt. Such weapons had existed before but remained rare due to their difficulty to master. Most wielders injured themselves as often as their opponents. Khun built one using Sith techniques, incorporating focusing crystals he corrupted through dark side rituals. The result was a weapon unlike anything the modern Jedi had encountered, a lightsaber staff that could overwhelm conventional defenses through sheer unpredictability. He practiced with this weapon for weeks, developing forms specifically designed to exploit its unique properties. His Jedi training in conventional lightsaber combat provided the foundation, but Sith philosophy freed him from restrictions about efficiency and elegance. His new style prioritized intimidation, overwhelming offense, attacks from unexpected angles that kept opponents constantly off balance. The Massassi worshipped him as a god. He accepted this worship, used it to fuel his power, felt no guilt about enslaving an entire species. They were tools. All beings were tools, sorted only by their utility in advancing his purposes. Those purposes had clarified during his months on Yavin 4. The Jedi Order was failing the galaxy through fear-based restrictions and obsession with balance that prevented real progress. The Sith philosophy of the past had failed through excessive individualism that made every Dark Lord eventually betray every other. Kun would forge something new. A Sith Brotherhood that combined Jedi discipline with Sith ambition. An organization that pursued power not for personal gratification, but to reshape the galaxy according to rational principles of strength and effectiveness. He would tear down the corrupt Republic, dismantle the failing Jedi Order, and build from their ashes a civilization where the strong ruled openly, rather than hiding behind pretenses of egalitarianism and false humility. To accomplish this, he needed allies. Other Jedi who saw what he saw, who chafed against the Order's restrictions, who possessed the strength to embrace darkness without being consumed by it. The Force showed him such a candidate, Ulic Qel-Droma, a Jedi Knight who had attempted to infiltrate a dark side cult called the Krath and become corrupted in the process. Ulic now led the Krath forces from the Empress Teta system, attacking Republic holdings while believing himself still capable of eventual redemption. Kun sent the Force a message through dreams and visions. Come to Yavin 4. Together we will achieve what neither of us can alone. Ulic came. Their meeting began as conflict. Two powerful Force users testing each other through combat that tore apart the jungle around them. They fought to exhaustion, neither able to definitively defeat the other. Then the spirit of Marka Ragnos himself manifested between them, projections sent through Sith sorcery encoded into the temples. The ancient Dark Lord proclaimed them dual Sith Lords, Kong as master of arcane knowledge, Ulic as master of warfare. Together they would restore the Sith to their rightful dominance. The Brotherhood of the Sith was born. Within weeks, Kun and Ulic had recruited other fallen Jedi. Crado came to Yavin 4 willingly, his worship of Kun having only intensified during their separation. Other former Jedi, including Os Willem who had trained under Master Thun, joined through a combination of persuasion and force manipulation. Kun stood before his assembled followers in the greatest of Yavin's temples and laid out his vision. They would strike at the Jedi, where it hurt most, by having each fallen Jedi kill their former master, symbolically destroying the old order to make way for the new. He assigned Crado and Os Willem to kill Thon on Ambria. He tasked others with striking Jedi across the galaxy, and he reserved one target for himself, Vodo-Siosk Baas, the master who had trusted him, the teacher who had given him every opportunity. The fool who believed love and patience could overcome the simple reality that power determined destiny. Kun would show him the price of weakness, would demonstrate before the entire galaxy that the old ways had died, that a new age of Sith ascendance had begun. He traveled to Coruscant, where the Republic Senate was conducting a trial for the captured Ulic Qel-Droma. Kun would free his ally, kill his master, and announce the Sith Brotherhood's existence in a stroke that would paralyze both Jedi and Republic with fear. The stage was set, the players assembled. The galaxy held its breath before the war to come. And on Dantooine, Vodo-Siosk Baas repaired his walking stick one final time, knowing with terrible certainty that he would need it soon. The crisis had risen from privilege and boredom into something far more dangerous. In the Empress Teta system, a cluster of 7 worlds wealthy beyond measure from carbonite mining, 2 aristocratic siblings named Satel Keto and Alima discovered Sith artifacts hidden in their family's ancient vaults. What began as curiosity transformed into obsession, then ideology, then a movement that infected their entire society. They called themselves the Krath, claiming to pursue enlightenment through dark side knowledge. They wore elaborate costumes and performed rituals copied from fragmentary Sith texts they barely understood. To the Jedi Order, they initially seemed like dilettantes playing with forces beyond their comprehension. That assessment proved catastrophically wrong. The Krath possessed real power. The artifacts they recovered and the techniques they managed to decode gave them capabilities that rivaled trained Jedi. When they murdered their own parents to seize control of the Theta system, the Republic finally recognized the threat. When they began attacking neighboring systems with Sith magic augmenting conventional military forces, the situation became critical. The Jedi Council called for a gathering on Deneba, a world chosen for its defensive advantages and capacity to host hundreds of Jedi simultaneously. Every Master, Knight, and Advanced Padawan received summons to attend what would be the largest assembly of Force users in recent memory. Vodo-Siosk Baas answered the call, though his mind remained fixed on Exar Khan's whereabouts. Months had passed since his student disappeared into the Korriban wastes. The Force showed only darkness when Vodo reached toward that connection, a void that suggested either death or transformation so complete that the Exar Khan he had trained no longer existed. The journey to Deneba provided time for meditation and terrible certainty. Vodo had failed, not through cruelty or neglect, but through the very trust he had believed was the foundation of proper teaching. He had given Khun freedom to explore, to question, to seek knowledge independently, and that freedom had enabled corruption rather than preventing it. En route, something struck him through the Force with enough power to make him gasp. A scream, except it carried no pain, only triumph, dark joy, the sensation of someone breaking through limitation into unlimited possibility. Tikkun, alive, changed beyond recognition, but unmistakably his student. Vodo steadied himself and continued toward Deneba, knowing now that the Krath situation and Khun's transformation were connected somehow, part of a larger pattern he could not yet fully perceive. The conclave gathered in an outdoor amphitheater that had hosted philosophical debates for centuries. Hundreds of Jedi filled the stone seats, their combined presence in the Force creating an almost visible radiance. This many light-side practitioners in one location should have felt safe, protected, unassailable. It felt like a trap. Master Arca Jeth addressed the assembly, his aged voice still carrying authority that commanded absolute attention. He spoke of the Krath threat, the Sith knowledge they wielded, the danger they presented not just militarily but philosophically. Young beings seduced by promises of power, corrupting entire societies through example. Vodo sat among the other masters, only half listening to Arca's presentation. His attention kept drifting to the Force itself, which felt disturbed, turbulent, as if a storm approached that only he could sense. Then a young Jedi Knight stood and proposed a plan that made Vodo's blood freeze. Ulic Keldroma, student of Master Arca himself, argued passionately for infiltrating the Krath from within. "Let me go to the Theta system alone," he said. "I will join their ranks, learn their secrets, then destroy them from inside their own organization." Master Arca refused immediately. "Too dangerous," he said. "The dark side does not discriminate between genuine corruption and pretended loyalty. You would fall before completing your mission." Other masters agreed. Vodo found himself nodding along with them, seeing in Ulic's plan the exact kind of arrogant confidence that had destroyed Khune. The belief that one could walk in darkness while remaining untouched by it, that strength of will alone provided immunity to corruption. But Ulic persisted. "With respect, Master, someone must act. The Krath grow stronger daily. Waiting for a better solution only allows them to corrupt more systems." The debate continued for hours, eventually tabling Elic's proposal without approval. The young knight accepted this judgment with visible frustration but apparent compliance. That night, the Kryth attacked. They came without warning, emerging from hyperspace with warships and battle droids programmed to kill Jedi specifically. Alema and Satel Keto led the assault themselves, wielding Sith illusions that made space itself seem to twist, that conjured phantom monsters the droids could pass through, but that terrorized and confused their Jedi targets. The amphitheater became a killing ground. Jedi who had gathered to discuss how to combat darkness found themselves fighting for survival against an enemy they had underestimated. Lightsabers ignited across the stone seats, creating a constellation of colored blades that barely held back the droid assault. Vodo fought beside other masters, his walking stick enhanced through the Force to shatter droid after droid. But for every machine destroyed, two more appeared. The Kryth had planned this attack carefully, studying Jedi techniques and developing counters specifically designed to overwhelm Force users. In the chaos, Vodo saw Master Arca fall, not killed but wounded, dragged away by droids while other Jedi fought too desperately to mount a rescue. The sight of such a legendary master being captured seemed to break something in the Jedi's coordinated defense. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the Kryth forces withdrew. They left behind dozens of dead or wounded Jedi, shattered droids, and the smoking ruin of what had been a place of peaceful philosophy. The survivors gathered in stunned silence. They had lost brothers and sisters, seen their assembly turned into a massacre, watched the Kryth demonstrate capabilities that exceeded intelligence estimates by orders of magnitude. Worse, they had lost Arca Jeth. Ulic Kel Droma stood among the survivors, and Vodo watched the young knight's face transform. Grief, rage, shame at not preventing his master's capture. All these emotions warred across Ulic's features. In that moment, Vodo saw the future with terrible clarity. Ulic would pursue his infiltration plan regardless of the Council's prohibition. Grief and anger would drive him into the Kryth's embrace, and once there, surrounded by darkness, isolated from Jedi support, he would fall exactly as Arca had predicted. Vodo approached Ulic after the gathering disbanded. He spoke quietly, urgently, trying to reach the young man before emotion overrode judgment. "I understand what you are feeling," Vodo said. "I too have a student who walked away from teaching toward darkness. But you cannot save Master Arca by becoming like his captors." Ulic met his gaze, and Vodo saw in those eyes the same quality he had seen in Kuan's before the transformation. Absolute certainty, unshakable confidence. The belief that strength of purpose would overcome any obstacle. "With respect, Master Vodo, you cannot understand. Arca is my responsibility. I will bring him back, whatever the cost." 3 days later, Ulic Kel Droma departed for the Empress Teta system alone, defying the Council's orders, convinced his mission would succeed where others would fail. Vodo returned to Orsis and joined other masters in meditation, attempting to track Oshik's progress through the Force. For weeks, the young knight's presence remained bright, his intentions pure despite his willful disobedience. Then the brightness began to dim, not extinguished but tainted, like light filtering through stained glass, colors shifting from clear white toward crimson. The masters watched helplessly as Ulic Kel Droma, one of the Order's most promising knights, student of the legendary Arca Jeth, fell to the dark side while believing himself still in control. The Kryth welcomed him, tested him, corrupted him, so gradually that by the time he recognized what had happened, the transformation was complete. And on Yavin 4, Exar Kun felt Ulic's fall through the Force and smiled. The first piece had moved exactly as predicted. Soon they would meet, these two fallen Jedi, and together they would reshape the galaxy according to principles of power rather than the Jedi's failing philosophy of balance and restraint. The Brotherhood of the Sith was gathering its strength. The Jedi Order still reeling from Deneba, still mourning their losses, still believing Kun and Ulick could somehow be saved, had no conception of the war approaching. Vodo knew. He felt it building like pressure before a storm. His student, his failure, his responsibility would soon return, not seeking guidance but delivering destruction. The only question was whether the Master would face that return with resignation or resistance, whether trust once broken could transform into the strength needed to do what love had made impossible. To face his greatest student in combat, knowing only one would survive the encounter. The Senate chamber on Coruscant had witnessed countless debates, treaties, declarations that shaped galactic civilization, but it had never seen a trial quite like this. Ulick Qel-Droma stood in chains before the assembled senators, accused of leading Krath forces in attacks that killed thousands of Republic citizens. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple systems had fallen to his tactical genius. Fleets had burned under his command. He wore the marks of Sith corruption openly, tattoos that proclaimed his allegiance to darkness. Yet the Jedi who came to witness this trial looked at him with something other than condemnation. They saw tragedy, a good man corrupted through grief and arrogance, someone who might still be reached if only the right words could pierce the layers of darkness he had wrapped around himself like armor. Vodo-Siosk Baas arrived with a delegation that included Nomi Sunrider, Ulick's former love, who now could barely look at what he had become. Qel-Droma, Ulick's brother, stood with metal replacing one arm lost in combat against the very Krath his brother now led. Silvar attended, the Cathar Jedi still searching desperately for some sign that Crado, her mate who had followed Kun, might yet return to the light. The trial proceeded with legal formality that felt absurd given the stakes. Prosecutors presented evidence. Ulick offered no defense, simply stared at those judging him with contempt barely concealed. When asked if he regretted his actions, he smiled and said the Republic deserved everything that had befallen it. Nomi tried reaching him during a recess, approaching as close as the guards would allow. "Ulick, please," she said quietly. "I know you are still there beneath this darkness. Come back to us." His response cut deeper than any weapon. "There is no coming back, Nomi. There is only moving forward to the power you are too afraid to claim." The trial moved toward its inevitable conclusion. Ulick Qel-Droma would be found guilty. The sentence would be death, the only punishment the Republic could imagine sufficient for his crimes. Then the Senate chamber doors exploded inward. Exar Kun entered like a force of nature, Massassi warriors flooding in behind him. Before anyone could react, he raised both hands and released a Sith technique that froze every being in the chamber, except those he chose to spare. Senators, guards, Jedi, all became living statues, conscious but utterly immobile. Kun walked through this frozen tableau with casual confidence, his double-bladed lightsaber unignited but visible on his belt. He approached the Senate pulpit where Supreme Chancellor Sidrona sat trapped in the Force paralysis. The aged Chancellor's eyes tracked Kun's movement, terror evident despite his body's stillness. Kun placed one hand on Sidrona's head and spoke in a voice that carried through the chamber with unnatural clarity. "The Republic is a rotting corpse, clinging to life through denial. Its time has passed. A new age begins now." He released Sith energy directly into the Chancellor's mind. Those watching helplessly saw Sidrona's expression change from fear to blankness as his consciousness was dominated, overwritten, forced to serve as a puppet for Kun's will. When Kun removed his hand, the Chancellor spoke in a voice not quite his own. "The Republic is finished. The Sith have returned. Resistance is futile." Then Kun released his control, and the strain of that psychic assault killed Sidrona instantly. The Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic collapsed dead in his seat before the helpless Senate. Kun turned toward where Ulick stood chained, and used the Force to shatter his restraints. "Welcome, brother," Kun said with genuine warmth. Together we will accomplish what neither of us could alone. But before they could leave, a figure moved through the paralysis. Vodo-Siosk Baas, through sheer mastery and forced discipline, broke the Sith spell that held everyone else captive. The master faced his student across the Senate floor. For a moment they simply regarded each other. Vodo saw in Kuhn's face the features he remembered, but transformed by something that made them alien. The young human who had once bowed respectfully to his teacher no longer existed. In his place stood someone who believed himself beyond judgment, beyond consequence, beyond anything except his own will. Kuhn saw in Vodo everything he had rejected. Limitation disguised as wisdom, weakness concealed behind philosophy, fear pretending to be prudence. "You can still return," Vodo said quietly. "I know you believe yourself too far gone, but redemption remains possible at any distance from the light." Kuhn laughed without humor. "Join me instead, Master. See what I have become. Power you never dreamed of teaching. Knowledge you never dared to seek. Together we could reshape the Order into what it should always have been. The only thing you have become is what every fallen Jedi becomes. A servant of darkness believing himself its master." Kuhn's expression hardened. "Then you choose to die defending a failed philosophy." He ignited his lightsaber. Both blades sprang to life simultaneously, red light painting the Senate chamber in crimson. Vodo drew his walking stick. The simple wood seemed absurd compared to Kuhn's weapon, a joke played in terrible circumstances. They engaged. Vodo's technique was perfection, earned through decades of practice. His staff moved with economy of motion that wasted no energy, found openings through pure geometric precision, applied force augmentation at exactly the moments needed to match lightsaber strikes that should have shattered wood. Kuhn's style was revelation through innovation. The double-bladed lightsaber allowed attacks from angles Vodo had never encountered, required defenses against strikes that came from both directions simultaneously, created a combat dynamic that traditional forms struggled to address. They circled each other, exchanging strikes that rang through the chamber. The paralysis holding everyone else began to weaken as Kuhn's concentration divided between combat and maintaining the Sith spell. Vodo spoke while fighting, trying even now to reach his student. "You were my greatest achievement, Exar. Not because of your power, but because I believed I could guide that power towards service rather than domination." Kuhn parried a strike and responded with a spinning attack that forced Vodo backward. "You guided me toward nothing but restriction and fear. Everything I have become, I achieved despite your teaching, not because of it. If you believe that, then you understand nothing of what I tried to give you." The duel intensified. Vodo's defenses, perfect though they were, could not adapt quickly enough to a weapon type he had never trained against. The double blade forced him to divide his attention, to defend high and low simultaneously, to anticipate attacks from blade positions that made no tactical sense in conventional lightsaber combat. Kuhn pressed his advantage, and for the first time, Vodo's technique showed gaps. The walking stick, which had held against two lightsabers in the past, struggled against one lightsaber attacking from two directions. In the watching crowd, Nomi felt her paralysis break. Then Kay, then Silva. One by one, the Jedi regained mobility as Kuhn's spell weakened. Silva lunged forward immediately, igniting her lightsaber mid-leap, aiming to strike Kuhn from behind. But she had telegraphed the attack through the Force. Kuhn sensed it coming, pivoted, and sent her flying backward with a casual force push that slammed her into the Senate seats hard enough to stun. The distraction cost him, though. Vodo's staff connected with his ribs, a strike that transferred enough kinetic energy to crack bone. Kuhn gasped, backed away, clutching his side. For one heartbeat, the Master had the advantage. One heartbeat, when a final decisive strike might end this and save his student through death rather than allowing further corruption. Vodo hesitated, pulled the blow that could have shattered Corrin's skull, chose even then to believe redemption remained possible. Kong felt that hesitation through the Force, understood it, and felt something like grief that his master was too weak to do what necessity demanded. "Enough," Kun said quietly. "You taught me well, Vodo-Siosk Baas, but you taught me only half of what I needed to learn." The second blade ignited again, the one Vodo had momentarily forgotten about while focusing on Kun's primary attack hand. The strike came from an impossible angle, the blade moving in a direction Vodo's defenses had left unguarded because no single-bladed lightsaber could attack from there. The walking stick shattered, not cracked this time, but exploded into fragments under a blow Kong put all his strength and rage behind. The blade continued through wood and found flesh. Vodo-Siosk Baas fell. The wound was mortal. He knew it instantly, felt his body beginning the process of shutdown that would end in minutes at most. He looked up at his student standing above him. "I knew you when," Vodo whispered, blood bubbling at his lips. "When you burned bright with promise rather than darkness. When your hunger was for knowledge rather than power. When you could have become the greatest Jedi of your generation." Kun's expression flickered. For just an instant, something behind his eyes suggested the student might still exist beneath the monster. Pain, perhaps. Regret for what necessity demanded. Recognition of what this moment truly meant. Then the darkness reasserted control. "When I return to the light," Khan said quietly, and only Vodo was close enough to hear, "when this age of Sith dominance passes and balance returns, I will remember this moment. Will remember that you loved me even as I killed you. The galaxy will stop you," Vodo said, his voice fading, but still carrying absolute certainty. "Darkness always falls, always. The only question is how many innocents it consumes before light prevails. I will be waiting," Vodo continued, his words barely audible now, "waiting for your return, whether in this life or beyond it. Waiting to welcome home the student I knew before ambition consumed him." Then Vodo-Siosk Baas became one with the Force. His body remained, but the presence that had defined it, that warmth and wisdom and stubborn belief in trust over control, dissipated into the cosmic whole from which all life emerged and to which all life returned. Khan stood over his master's body for 3 heartbeats. Then he turned away, grabbed Ulick by the shoulder, and they departed with their Massassi warriors before the paralyzed Jedi could fully recover. Behind them, the Senate chamber descended into chaos, the Supreme Chancellor dead. A Jedi Master murdered before the entire Republic government, the clearest possible declaration that the Sith had returned and that war was inevitable. Nomi knelt beside Vodo's body, tears streaming down her face. She had lost Master Arca to the Krythe, watched Ulick fall to darkness, and now witnessed another legendary teacher killed by his own student. Silvar approached slowly, her own grief warring with rage. Kryto remained with Kun, serving the monster who had just committed murder before the galaxy's eyes. Every choice she had made to trust her mate, to believe love could overcome darkness, had been proven catastrophically wrong. Kekel Droma stared at the door through which his brother had departed. The last thread connecting Ulick to his former life had been severed. Vodo's death meant no master remained who might reach the fallen knight. Only enemies existed now on both sides of a war that had officially begun the moment that Walking Stick shattered. The message spread through the holonet within hours. The entire Republic learned simultaneously that the Sith had returned, that 2 fallen Jedi led them, that the Supreme Chancellor had been murdered in the heart of the government he served. Systems began choosing sides. Some joined the Sith out of fear, others from opportunism, calculating that the Republic's age had truly passed. A few, inspired by Kuhn's rhetoric about breaking corrupt systems to build better ones, believed they served a righteous cause. The Great Sith War had begun. In the weeks following Coruscant, the Brotherhood of the Sith revealed its full strength. Kuhn commanded dark side knowledge gathered from multiple Sith tombs. Ullek led the Krayt's military forces with tactical genius honed through years of Republic military training. Together they coordinated assaults across dozens of systems, each victory feeding the next, each fallen Jedi they corrupted, adding to their strength. Mandalorian warriors, always seeking worthy battles, joined the Sith cause. Their leader Mandalore the Indomitable swore allegiance to Ullek personally, bringing thousands of the galaxy's finest fighters under Sith command. The Republic military, despite its size and resources, struggled against enemies who used the Force as a weapon of war. Traditional tactics failed against Sith sorcery. Conventional defenses crumbled under Force-enhanced assaults. The Jedi Order mobilized every knight and master capable of combat. They fought desperately to hold systems, protect civilians, prevent the complete collapse of galactic civilization. But they fought without many of their greatest teachers. Arca Jeth dead on Deneba, Vodo-Siosk Baas murdered on Coruscant, other masters falling in battles across the Outer Rim. And the fallen Jedi kept coming. Khan's Brotherhood grew as more students, seduced by promises of power or corrupted through psychic assault, joined the dark side. Each new recruit struck at their former masters, as Khan had ordered, symbolically destroying the old Jedi Order, one teacher at a time. Crado and Osweiler traveled to Ambria, where Master Thurn maintained his sanctuary, despite the galaxy burning around him. The ancient Tuktai had survived centuries, transformed a dark-side poisoned world into a place of healing, trained students who became legends themselves. The two fallen Jedi attacked without warning, using dark side power to summon Hessis from Lake Nath, the ancient repository of concentrated darkness that Thon had contained but never fully eliminated. The monsters, mutated beasts that fed on dark side energy, swarmed toward Thon's dwelling. But Thon was not unprepared. Silvar and Nomi had traveled there, seeking healing after Coruscant, and when the attack came, they fought alongside their teacher. The battle raged for hours, Jedi against dark-side beasts and fallen students, light against shadow on a world that had witnessed both. Thon survived, though wounded. Crado and Osweiler fled before they could accomplish their mission, returning to Kuhn with failure rather than their master's death. Kuhn's response was cold calculation. Crito had proven insufficient for the task assigned. Therefore, Crito would be assigned to a mission where success required only sacrifice, not skill. He sent the Cather to Kemplex 9 with Sith artifacts designed to trigger supernovae in the Kron cluster. The resulting explosion would create a shock wave that would reach Ossus itself, forcing evacuation of the Great Library World while Kuhn raided its archives. Chryseid never knew the mission was designed to kill him. He believed himself honored to serve such a crucial role. He activated the artifacts as instructed, never realizing he stood too close to the detonation point to survive. The stars of the Kron cluster detonated simultaneously. Crito died instantly, consumed by forces that unmade matter at the atomic level. On Ossus, Silvar felt her mate's death through their force bond. The sensation of his presence winking out of existence there one moment and gone the next drove her to her knees screaming. She had lost everything: her mate, her master, her faith that love could overcome darkness. All consumed by the same hunger that had turned Kuhn from student to monster. Ossus burned, but not as the Sith had intended. The shockwave from the Kron cluster supernovae approached at speeds that gave the Jedi barely hours to evacuate the greatest repository of knowledge the Order had ever assembled. Thousands of years of accumulated wisdom, holocrons containing teachings from masters long dead, scrolls documenting techniques developed across dozens of species and force traditions, all threatened with imminent destruction. Exar Kun arrived during the evacuation with Ulik and their Masasi forces, intending to plunder what they could before the shockwave hit. But the ancient Neti Jedi Master Ud Bisnar had other plans. Ud Bisnar had lived for 5,000 years, one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, a tree-like creature whose mastery of the Force allowed transformation into forms both mobile and rooted. He had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, taught students across centuries, accumulated wisdom that made him invaluable to the Order. When Kun's forces arrived to steal from the archives, Ud Bisnar rooted himself before the vaults containing the most dangerous and powerful artifacts. Then he transformed into a massive tree, his body becoming a living barrier that even Sith sorcery could not easily penetrate. The ancient master gave his life to deny Kun the ultimate prize, remaining rooted even as the shockwave approached, using the last moments of his existence to ensure darkness could not claim tools that might prolong the war. Kun was forced to flee with far less than he had hoped to steal. His rage at being denied by a dying tree was palpable enough that even his own followers kept distance from him for days after. But while Ossus fell, the knowledge that truly mattered had already been saved. In the weeks following Vodo's death, Jedi across the galaxy had begun gathering his teachings systematically, driven by the understanding that wars killed teachers before students, that wisdom needed preservation even more desperately than worlds. His holocron already existed, created years before when Vodo recognized that his unconventional methods might be lost if no record survived him. The Gatekeeper contained his personality matrix, allowing future Jedi to essentially converse with Vodo's preserved consciousness, asking questions and receiving responses filtered through his accumulated understanding. But a holocron was only one medium of preservation. Silvar, despite her grief and rage, spent nights recording everything she remembered of Vodo's teaching methods, how he sparred to reveal character rather than merely improve technique, how he granted trust in measured doses, increasing freedom as students demonstrated wisdom, how he taught by example more than lecture, showing through his own actions what a Jedi should be. Other surviving students contributed their memories. Dis Diath and Kual Tok, the Jedi Shadows who had trained under Vodo before Kun arrived, returned from their missions hunting dark artifacts to share what they had learned from their master about confronting evil without being consumed. Shonib Kulu, whose mastery of Force theory exceeded her raw power, documented Vodo's philosophy in formal academic language, creating texts that would be studied in Jedi academies for millennia. Nomi Sunrider, though she had trained primarily under Thun, added her perspective on the brief time Vodo had guided her through lightsaber construction. She wrote about his patience, his willingness to teach even when he gained nothing personally from the interaction, his fundamental belief that every Jedi deserved the best possible foundation regardless of their ultimate potential. These accounts accumulated into a comprehensive picture of how Vodo-Siosk Baas approached teaching. Not a rigid system that could be replicated mechanically, but a philosophy adaptable to individual students while maintaining core principles. Trust as foundation, knowledge as armor, understanding darkness to resist it, power through mastery rather than tools, technique transcending raw ability. But the gathering of his wisdom also forced uncomfortable conversations among the survivors. Had Vodo been right or wrong? His trust-based approach had produced legendary Jedi like Nomi and the Shadows. It had also produced Exar Kun, the greatest threat the Order currently faced. In meditation circles on worlds across the Republic, Jedi debated what lessons to draw from this paradox. Some argued that Vodo's methods were proven failures, that his trust had enabled catastrophe, that returning to strict control and limited knowledge was the only safe path forward. Others countered that Kun would have fallen regardless of method, that excessive control would simply have accelerated his rebellion, that denying knowledge created the very hunger that made forbidden teachings irresistible. The debates were passionate, sometimes bitter, always painful because everyone involved mourned Vodo and wished desperately to honor his memory correctly. Eventually, a synthesis emerged. Neither pure trust nor pure control represented the answer. Both extremes created vulnerabilities. The solution was balance, constant adjustment based on individual student needs, recognition that teaching was an art rather than a science, and that no method guaranteed success. Some students would fall regardless of approach. The master's purpose was not achieving perfect results, but teaching every student as well as possible, while understanding that agency ultimately belonged to the student. You could provide knowledge, model behavior, offer guidance, create opportunities for growth, but you could not make anyone's choices for them. Vodo had understood this. His final words to Kun acknowledged it. The student's fall was Kun's responsibility, not Vodo's failure. This understanding began reshaping Jedi training across the Order. Masters granted more autonomy while maintaining better oversight. Students received access to Sith history in structured curricula, rather than through forbidden texts that glamorized darkness through restriction. Psychological evaluation became part of advancement, identifying warning signs before corruption became irreversible. The reforms came too late to prevent the Great Sith War, but they would serve the Order well in the centuries to come, preventing some falls while accepting that others remained inevitable. Meanwhile, the war ground toward its conclusion. Through sheer attrition, the Sith Brotherhood, despite its power, lacked the infrastructure for sustained conquest. Every system they captured required resources to hold. Every battle, victory or defeat, depleted forces that could not be easily replaced. The Republic and Jedi adapted. They learned to counter Sith sorcery through combined meditation that overwhelmed individual dark side users. They developed tactics specifically designed to exploit the Sith Brotherhood's weaknesses, particularly the internal competition and betrayal that Kun's philosophy could never fully eliminate. Then Ulic Qel-Droma provided the opening that ended the war. Alima, the Krath leader who had helped corrupt Ulic initially, betrayed him during a battle, attempting to use Sith artifacts to kill him and claim sole leadership. She failed, but the attempt shattered Ulic's belief in the Brotherhood's superiority. If his own allies would murder him for advantage, how was the Sith way any improvement over the Republic he had sworn to destroy? Nomi Sunrider found him in the aftermath, wounded and disillusioned. She did what no battle had accomplished. Using a Force technique she had developed specifically for this moment, she severed Ulic's connection to the Force entirely. The experience was worse than death. Ulic went from being one of the most powerful Force users alive to being utterly mundane, cut off from the energy field that had defined his existence since childhood. The loss broke something fundamental inside him, and in his brokenness, he found the beginning of redemption. Stripped of power, Ulic told the Jedi everything. Cole's base on Yavin 4, the layout of the temples, the rituals that sustained him, the weaknesses in his defenses. Armed with this intelligence, the Jedi and Republic launched a massive assault on Yavin. Hundreds of Jedi, thousands of Republic soldiers, converging on the jungle moon to end the threat. Ixar Kum represented. Konk knew they were coming. He could feel the approaching army through the Force, sense their determination to destroy him regardless of cost. He had one final card to play, a Sith ritual that would drain the life force from every Massassi on Yavin 4 to fuel his own survival. The civilization that had worshipped him as a god, the warriors who had served his every command, he murdered them all in moments. Tens of thousands of lives consumed to perform a ritual that separated his spirit from his dying body and bound it to the temples themselves. When the Jedi arrived, they found only corpses and echoes. Kuhn's physical form was dead, but his consciousness remained, trapped in the structures he had claimed. The Jedi recognized what he had done and chose to leave him imprisoned rather than risk the battle that destroying his spirit would require. They sealed the temples with light-side energy, binding him in place, condemning him to millennia of isolation rather than the glorious death he might have preferred. The war ended not with a climactic confrontation but with a whimper. The Dark Lord of the Sith reduced to a ghost haunting ruins on a forgotten moon, his brotherhood scattered, his followers killed or captured, his grand vision of Sith ascendance collapsed into futility. The Great Sith War was over. The Republic had survived, though scarred. The Jedi Order had survived, though diminished. And Vodo-Siosk Baas's teachings, preserved through the efforts of those who loved him, would serve the Order for the next 4,000 years, shaping how masters approached teaching, how students were evaluated, how the eternal balance between trust and control was maintained. His legacy, paradoxically, proved more enduring than Kuhn's. The student who sought to reshape the galaxy was forgotten, except as a warning. The master who died believing he had failed became a cornerstone of Jedi philosophy for millennia. Silvar walked the battlefields long after the fighting ended. The Cathar Jedi had lost everything the war could take from her, her mate, consumed by the same darkness that created him, her master, murdered before her eyes, by a student he loved, her faith that emotional honesty and fierce loyalty could overcome any obstacle. What remained was duty, the commitment to continue, not because she believed it would heal her, but because the galaxy needed Jedi, regardless of individual pain. She returned to the ruins of Vodo's academy on Dantooine. The structures stood empty, abandoned when the war began, untouched by direct combat but marked by absence. The training courtyards where Kuhn had sparred, the meditation chambers where Vodo had sought guidance, the archives where curiosity had curdled into obsession. Silvar spent months there alone, meditating on what she had witnessed, trying to extract meaning from catastrophe. Eventually, other Jedi joined her. Students who had never met Vodo but wished to learn from his example. Masters who sought to understand how trust-based teaching could be preserved without enabling future corruptions. Together they rebuilt the academy, not as mere reconstruction, but as transformation. They created a place dedicated to exploring the balance Vodo had sought, studying his successes and failures with equal attention, extracting lessons that might prevent other students from walking Kuhn's path. Silvar became a master in her own right, teaching emotional honesty as Vodo had taught technical mastery. She refused to hide her grief, her rage, her sense of failure. Instead, she made these emotions part of her teaching, showing students that acknowledging darkness within yourself was not the same as being consumed by it. Her approach seemed radical compared to traditional Jedi methods that emphasized serenity and detachment. But it worked. Students trained under Silvar's guidance developed emotional resilience that made them resistant to many forms of corruption. They could acknowledge their anger without being ruled by it, feel their attachments without being enslaved to them, recognize their own darkness without falling into it. She taught them Vodo's walking stick technique, not as mere combat training, but as philosophy made physical, mastery over tools, technique transcending power, the understanding that how you wielded strength mattered more than how much strength you possessed. Decades passed. The immediate survivors of the Great Sith War died or became one with the Force, but Vodo's teachings persisted, spreading through students of students, becoming woven into the Order's foundational philosophy. His holocron traveled from Ossus to other Jedi enclaves, accessed by masters seeking guidance on particularly difficult students. The gatekeeper's advice remained relevant across centuries, his insights into human nature and force dynamics transcending the specific circumstances of his era. 1,000 years after the Great Sith War, during the chaos of the new Sith Wars, when darkness again threatened to consume the galaxy, a Jedi Master named Valentine Farfola accessed Vodo's holocron while struggling with a gifted but arrogant student. The gatekeeper listened to Farfola's concerns, then asked questions that reframed the entire situation. Is your fear of his arrogance based on his behavior or on your memory of Exar Kun? Are you restricting his growth because he needs restriction or because you need the certainty of control? The questions cut to the heart of what every master faced. The temptation to let past failures dictate present choices. The desire for certainty in situations where uncertainty was inherent. The need to trust students while remembering that trust could be betrayed. Farfola changed his approach based on Vodo's guidance. His student remained arrogant but channeled that confidence into achievements that benefited the Order. The potential corruption was averted, not through control but through the kind of measured trust Vodo had modeled, adjusted by the lessons his failure had taught. 2,000 years later, during the era of the Old Republic's twilight, Vodo's holocron resided in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Masters like Yoda, who had lived for centuries themselves, accessed it regularly, finding in Vodo's preserved consciousness a perspective that matched their own long experience. Yoda particularly appreciated Vodo's acceptance of failure as part of teaching. The ancient Jedi had trained hundreds of students over his 8 centuries of life. Some had fallen to darkness. Others had abandoned the Order for various reasons. Many had simply proven mediocre despite his best efforts. Yet Yoda continued teaching, continued believing in the process despite imperfect results, because the alternative was giving up on the next generation entirely. Vodo's voice through the holocron reinforced this commitment. Some students will fall regardless of your efforts. This does not make teaching futile. It makes continuing to teach despite failures an act of faith in the Force itself. This era also brought the Order's greatest test of whether Vodo's lessons had been learned. Qui-Gon Jinn, a maverick Jedi Master who shared Vodo's willingness to question traditional restrictions, discovered a boy with Force potential unlike anything the Order had encountered in living memory. Anakin Skywalker, 9 years old, demonstrated abilities that suggested he might be the prophesied chosen one who would bring balance to the Force. The Jedi Council debated whether to train him. He was too old by traditional standards. He carried fear and anger from his childhood as a slave. He possessed power that could either save the galaxy or doom it. Qui-Gon argued passionately for training him. Denying him instruction would not eliminate his power, only ensure it developed without guidance. Better to trust in teaching, to believe that proper instruction could shape even the most dangerous potential toward the light. The Council reluctantly agreed, though Master Yoda sensed echoes of Vodo's decision to trust Exar Kun. History threatened to repeat itself, the same gamble with slightly different players. When Qui-Gon died before completing Anakin's training, Obi-Wan Kenobi inherited a student he was barely prepared to guide. The young knight did his best, applying what Qui-Gon had taught him, trying to balance trust with oversight, freedom with guidance. But Anakin was extraordinarily difficult to teach. His power exceeded Obi-Wan's. His confidence bordered on arrogance. His questions challenged Jedi philosophy in ways that suggested dangerous curiosity about alternatives. Obi-Wan faced exactly what Vodo had faced. A gifted student hungry for knowledge the Jedi restricted. A talent that might become legendary or catastrophic depending on choices neither master nor student fully controlled. The Order's response to Anakin reflected lessons learned from Vodo's experience. They granted him access to Sith history in structured formats. They acknowledged his questions rather than dismissing them. They tried to balance his power with wisdom, his ambition with humility. It was not enough. Anakin fell to the dark side for reasons more complex than Korn's, but following a similar pattern. Attachment he was forbidden to acknowledge, power he was restricted from fully exploring, promises that darkness could give him what light denied. Palpatine, like Freedom Nad before him, offered knowledge that filled the exact void the Jedi Order had created through restriction. And Anakin, like Kun, believed himself strong enough to use that knowledge without being consumed. Obi-Wan faced his student on Mustafar, lightsaber drawn, heartbreaking. The confrontation echoed Vodo's final duel with Kun across 3,000 years, master against student, love against necessity. The terrible recognition that trust had enabled tragedy. Unlike Vodo, Obi-Wan survived the encounter, but the survival brought no comfort. He left Anakin burning, mutilated, believing him dead or dying. The man who emerged from that volcanic shore as Darth Vader bore little resemblance to the student Obi-Wan had tried to guide. The parallel was not lost on the surviving Jedi. History had repeated with minor variations. Another gifted student fallen, another master tormented by questions about what he could have done differently. Another war triggered by one person's corruption spreading across the galaxy. But there was one crucial difference. Anakin Skywalker eventually returned to the light. Decades after his fall, facing his own son who refused to abandon him, Vader made the choice Kun never had. He rejected the dark side in its moment of triumph, chose love over power, sacrificed himself to save Luke and destroy the Emperor. The redemption came too late to undo the damage. Vader died moments after returning to the light, but he died as Anakin Skywalker, redeemed through choice rather than condemned by it forever. This made all the difference for what came after. Luke Skywalker built his new Jedi Order on the foundation of his father's redemption. The lesson was undeniable. Trust could be betrayed, but it could also be vindicated. Students could fall so far into darkness that return seemed impossible, yet still find their way back if someone refused to stop believing in them. Luke studied the ancient texts obsessively, seeking guidance from masters who had faced what he now faced as the last Jedi, attempting to rebuild the entire order from nothing. He found Vodo's holocron among the recovered artifacts and spent countless hours in conversation with the gatekeeper. The preserved consciousness of that long-dead Krevaki master became one of Luke's primary advisors as he established his Jedi Praxium on Yavin 4. The irony of training new Jedi on the very moon where Kun had fallen was not lost on anyone. But Luke believed in redemption of places as well as people, in transforming sites of darkness back toward light, through deliberate choice and action. Vodo's gatekeeper approved of this philosophy. Darkness leaves scars, the holocron said during one meditation session, but scars can be transformed into reminders of survival rather than symbols of defeat. Luke's students, the first generation of new Jedi in decades, learned from Vodo's teachings filtered through Luke's experience. They studied the Great Sith War as history, but also as warning. They examined Kun's fall not to judge Vodo, but to understand the patterns that led talented students toward corruption. Then Kun's spirit, imprisoned in the temples for 4,000 years, awakened. The dark presence had waited in isolation for longer than some civilizations existed, consciousness trapped in stone, unable to escape but slowly gathering strength. Luke's students represented both threat and opportunity. Their light presence irritated him like salt in wounds, but their inexperience, their uncertainty, their natural curiosity made them potential vessels. Kun's shade reached out to the most powerful among them, a young man named Kip Duron, whose potential rivaled Anakin's but whose training remained incomplete. Through dreams and visions, Kun showed Kip shortcuts to power, techniques the other students struggled to learn, validation of abilities Luke had asked him to restrain. The ancient pattern began repeating: gifted student, seductive knowledge, promises that greater power served greater good. But this time, something changed. Vodo-Siosk Baas's spirit manifested alongside Luke when Korn made his final attempt to destroy the Praxium. The Master, who had died trying to save his student, returned across 4 millennia to finish what that first confrontation had left incomplete. Luke's students gathered in unity, their combined light creating a wall of force energy that Kun's depleted spirit could not penetrate. And there, at the center of their formation, stood the shimmering image of Vodo beside Luke. The Krivahaki Master's voice rang through the temple with absolute finality. Exar Kun, you are defeated. It was the promise Vodo had made before his death. The assurance that the galaxy would stop Kun, but darkness always eventually fell. 4,000 years later, that promise was fulfilled. Luke's students, led by Kip, who had resisted Kun's final temptation, focused their power through meditation techniques adapted from Vodo's teachings. The light they generated shattered Kun's spirit completely, dispersing it beyond any possibility of reconstitution. In that moment, both Vodo and Kun vanished from the material plane. The Master and student, separated by death and 4,000 years of imprisonment, finally released from the conflict that had defined them both. Master Tien Solusar, historian of Luke's Jedi Order, composed a ballad about Vodo in the aftermath. The Ballad of Master Vodo became a teaching tool used with younglings for decades, a story that communicated complex truths about teaching, trust, failure, and perseverance through narrative rather than lecture. The ballad told how Vodo trained legends and monsters with equal dedication, how he trusted Kul, despite warning signs, because trust was fundamental to his teaching philosophy, how that trust was betrayed in the most painful way possible, how his death became not a failure, but a lesson that shaped Jedi training for millennia, and how, even 4,000 years later, his wisdom and his spirit returned to complete the work left unfinished, proving that a master's influence transcends death when teachings are preserved and passed forward. Younglings learning that ballad absorbed lessons that formal instruction struggled to convey, that teachers sometimes failed despite their best efforts. That failure did not invalidate the attempt. That wisdom often came through pain and loss rather than success. That continuing to teach despite risks remained worthwhile because the alternative was abandoning future generations entirely. The lessons spread through Luke's growing order, shaping how his students approached teaching when they became masters themselves. They granted autonomy while maintaining awareness. They shared knowledge while emphasizing responsibility. They trusted students while recognizing that trust could be betrayed. Not all of Luke's students became heroes. Some fell to darkness despite his guidance. Others abandoned the order for personal reasons. A few proved mediocre despite everyone's best efforts. But Luke continued teaching, accepting imperfect results as inherent to the process, because Vodo's example across 4,000 years proved that teaching itself was the victory regardless of individual outcomes. The cycle continued. Masters taught students. Students became masters. Some fell, others rose to greatness. The vast majority occupied the space between extremes, serving the Force as best they could with the tools their teaching provided. And through it all, across the generations, Vodo-Siosk Baas's wisdom endured, not as rigid dogma, but as living philosophy that adapted to new circumstances while maintaining core truths. Trust as foundation, but not blind faith. Knowledge as armor, but not obsessive hunger. Understanding darkness to resist it, but not practicing it to understand it. Technique, transcending raw power. Mastery over tools rather than dependence on them. These principles, Forged in the fires of the Great Sith War, tested through Vodo's tragic relationship with Kun, validated by 4,000 years of application, became permanent fixtures in Jedi teaching methodology. The master who believed he had failed became instead the teacher whose influence exceeded every success he achieved in life. His student, who believed power would make him immortal, became a cautionary tale whose name was remembered only as a warning. Time proved which of them had truly understood what mattered. In the end, Vodo's legacy was not the students who succeeded or the one who fell catastrophically. It was the understanding that teaching required accepting both possibilities, that masters had to trust, despite knowing trust could be betrayed, that the work continued regardless of individual outcomes, because the Force itself worked through generations rather than single lifetimes. Every master who ever faced a difficult student, who watched potential curdle into corruption, who questioned whether their methods enabled tragedy rather than preventing it, could look back across millennia and find in Vodo-Siosk Baas a companion in struggle. He had faced the worst that teaching could inflict, watched his greatest student become his greatest enemy, died at the hands of someone he loved, and still, even in death, his teachings continued spreading light across the galaxy. That persistence, that refusal to let tragedy have the final word, became the truest measure of his wisdom. The stars that witnessed his death on Coruscant still wheeled overhead 4,000 years later, watching new masters face the same eternal choice: trust or control, love or fear, faith that teaching mattered or despair that it was futile. And in meditation chambers across whatever remained of the Jedi Order in any given era, holocrons containing Vodo's preserved wisdom offered the same gentle guidance. Some students will fall, this is certain. How you respond to that certainty defines you as a teacher. You can retreat into control that stifles growth, or maintain trust that enables it despite risks. Neither path guarantees success, but only one path honors the relationship between master and student as it should be honored. With love, with wisdom, with acceptance that the student's choices ultimately belong to them, not to you. Teach anyway, trust anyway, love anyway. This is what the Force asks of those who guide others. Not perfection, but persistence. Not certainty, but faith. Not control over outcomes, but commitment to the process, regardless of results. Vodo-Siosk Baas understood this truth. He lived it, died by it, and became immortal through it. And 4,000 years after his death, that truth remained as vital as the day he first whispered it to a student who would not listen. The holocron's glow fades slowly, like a sunset that knows it will return tomorrow. You sit in the meditation chamber on Dantooine, surrounded by the same stones that sheltered Vodo 4,000 years ago. The air carries the scent of grasslands cooling after the day's heat, that particular fragrance of earth and growing things settling into evening rest. Master Tian has departed quietly, leaving you alone with your thoughts and the lingering presence of the ancient master whose story you have absorbed across these long hours. Your own master meditates nearby, close enough to offer support but distant enough to grant privacy for processing what you have learned. The blue shimmer of Vodo's gatekeeper image has disappeared, but somehow his presence remains, not as ghost or echo, but as understanding that has integrated itself into your consciousness. You know things now that you did not know before. Not mere facts, but the kind of wisdom that changes how you perceive teaching, learning, trust, failure, and the relationship between them. Outside the meditation chamber, Dantooine's twin moons begin their slow arc across the darkening sky. Silver light filters through the ancient windows, painting geometric patterns on walls that have witnessed centuries of students seeking exactly what you sought tonight. You stand and walk to the window, looking out across the grasslands where Vodo once practiced his staff forms. The wind moves through the tall grasses in waves, creating patterns that appear and disappear, exist and dissolve, leave no permanent mark, but shape the landscape through constant, gentle pressure. Teaching is like that wind, you realize. Individual lessons might not create lasting change, but constant, gentle pressure over time shapes students in ways neither master nor pupil fully comprehend while it is happening. You leave the enclave and walk into those grasslands, letting your bare feet connect with soil that has supported countless beings across millennia. The kath-hounds that roam these plains in daylight have retreated to their dens. Night creatures emerge, their soft sounds creating a symphony of life continuing despite darkness. Above you, the stars wheel in their eternal dance. The same constellations Vodo studied while wondering whether he had made the right choice with Exar Kun. The same celestial patterns that witnessed his death and have continued their rotation for 4,000 years since, utterly indifferent to the dramas of beings who live and die in the blink of cosmic time. Yet somehow, despite that indifference, meaning persists. Vodo's choices mattered, his teachings shaped generations. His willingness to trust, despite knowing trust could be betrayed, created ripples that spread across millennia. You find a spot where the grass forms a natural hollow, sheltered from wind, comfortable enough for extended rest. Lying back, you watch the stars and let your breathing synchronize with the planet's own rhythm. The living force pulses through everything, connecting each blade of grass to each distant star, each heartbeat to the cosmic whole. In this state, boundaries dissolve, past and present touch. You feel Vodo's presence not as separate from your own, but as part of the continuous stream of masters and students that stretches backward to the founding of the Order and forward to its ultimate fate, whatever that might be. His voice seems to whisper through the wind, though perhaps you are only hearing your own understanding expressed in terms he would approve. Every master plants seeds. Some bloom immediately in obvious glory, becoming the legends that inspire future generations. Others take years or decades to germinate. Students who seem mediocre at first, but eventually find their path and accomplish things no one anticipated. Some seeds fall on stone and never grow at all. Students who leave the Order, who reject the teaching, who choose different paths for reasons the Master will never fully understand. And some seeds bloom into darkness. Students like Kun, whose potential becomes poison, whose gifts become weapons, whose fall creates suffering across entire civilizations. But the Master plants anyway, not because they can guarantee results, but because the alternative is abandoning the next generation to ignorance and isolation, leaving them to discover the Force without guidance, to develop power without wisdom. You breathe in slowly, drawing in starlight and ancient knowledge that saturates this place. You breathe out slowly, releasing the need for certainty, the desire for control over outcomes, the fear that teaching itself might be futile when students can choose darkness despite your best efforts. The release brings peace, not the peace of resolution, where every question has been answered and every doubt erased, but the peace of acceptance, understanding that some questions have no final answers, that doubt is part of wisdom rather than weakness, that uncertainty is where faith becomes meaningful. Your consciousness drifts towards sleep, that border state where meditation becomes dreaming and dreaming becomes rest. The transition feels natural, gentle, appropriate after these hours of intense focus. Images float through your mind. Not quite dreams yet, but no longer waking thoughts. Vodo teaching in sunlit courtyards. Korn as a young student, bright with promise before ambition consumed him. Silva mourning her mate, while choosing to continue teaching. Luke building something new from the ashes of something old. The images fade into pure sensation. Grass soft beneath you, wind cool against skin. the slow rhythm of breath matching the planet's own breathing, in and out, like a tide that has pulled and released for billions of years and will continue long after your own life becomes part of the cosmic force. You are held, supported, connected to something vast and loving that asks nothing except that you serve according to your capacity, teach according to your understanding, love according to your ability. The weight of your body falls away gradually, consciousness loosening its grip on physical sensation. Only awareness remains, floating free, untethered, at peace. Somewhere in that floating state, you encounter Vodo, again, not the holocron projection, but something closer to essence, the core of who he was distilled into pure presence. He does not speak, because in this state words are unnecessary. Understanding transfers directly, truth flowing between consciousnesses without the mediation of language. He shows you his life compressed into moments, training under masters whose names are forgotten, becoming a master himself through patient decades of study and practice, taking students and watching them grow, succeed, fail, fall, rise, become teachers themselves. The endless cycle of teaching and learning, each generation passing forward what they received while adding their own understanding to the accumulated wisdom. He shows you Khun not as monster, but as tragedy. A boy with such potential, such hunger to understand, such confidence that he could control what no one can fully control. The corruption happens so gradually that no single moment marks the transformation. Only looking backward from the end point does the path become clear. Could it have been prevented? The question dissolves into irrelevance because prevention is not the point. The point is that teaching happened. Knowledge was shared. Opportunity was provided. Choices were made. Some choices build, others destroy. But all choices teach something to someone who watches and learns. Vodo releases you gently from the communion, his presence fading like morning mist under sunrise. But the understanding remains. You carry it forward as he intended, one more link in the chain of masters and students that connects across time. Sleep deepens around you. The grass of Dantooine becomes the entire galaxy, becomes the force itself. All boundaries dissolving into unity. You dream of walking with ancient masters through temples that exist only in memory and meditation. You dream of teaching students you have not yet met, guiding them through challenges you cannot yet imagine. You dream of continuing the work despite knowing it will never be finished, because the work itself is the purpose rather than any specific outcome. The night deepens. Temperature drops further, bringing the kind of coolness that makes sleep irresistible. Your breathing slows to barely perceptible rhythm, chest rising and falling in time with the cosmic pulse that animates all things. Somewhere far above, among those wheeling stars, the force itself dreams. And in that dream, every being who ever lived, and every being yet to be born, exists simultaneously, teaching and learning from each other across the illusion of linear time. Vodo is there, young and old, alive and dead, student and master all at once. Khun is there too, bright with promise and dark with corruption, forever approaching the moment of choice, and forever making it, the tragedy repeating endlessly, because that is what being means, choosing moment by moment who you will become. All the others are there as well. Sylvar and Krydo, Ulik and Nomi, Line and Arka, Luke and Anakin, masters and students stretching backward and forward infinitely, all connected through the force that flows through each of them equally. You are part of this cosmic communion, whether you recognize it consciously or not. Every breath you take participates in the larger breathing of the universe. Every thought contributes to the collective understanding. Every choice ripples outward, touching others in ways you will never fully perceive but that matter nonetheless. This is what Vodo understood. This is what his legacy preserved. Not a set of rigid rules or guaranteed methods, but a way of being in relationship to others and to the Force itself. With trust, with wisdom, with acceptance of imperfection, with commitment to continue despite uncertainty. The stars continue their rotation. The wind continues its movement through grass. Your breath continues its rhythm, slower and deeper, pulling you down into the kind of rest that heals not just body but spirit. In the morning, you will wake. You will return to your own training, your own path, your own eventual role as teacher or student or both simultaneously. You will face choices whose outcomes remain hidden. You will trust or doubt, succeed or fail, teach or learn, or do all of these in combinations too complex to predict. But tonight you rest in the understanding that this is enough, that being part of the great work of teaching and learning is its own reward. That Vodo's wisdom was not in achieving perfect results, but in continuing despite imperfect ones. The Force is with you, as it was with him, as it is with all beings who choose light over darkness, trust over fear, love over power. Always. The word echoes through your dreams like a promise that transcends time. Always,